This episode is brought to you by Tambourine Spring Water. Visit tambourinSprings.com.au or call 0434 952 449 to order your water today. Tambourine Spring Water is a local business situated on Mount Tambourine. Their water is bottled at the source on their 163-meter deep privately owned spring. The spring provides access to a free-flowing underground stream, which is where their premium quality spring water comes from. It then goes through a very strict sediment and UV filtration process to ensure the final product remains both consistent and of brightest quality. It is then bottled and stored until it leaves for the client's home or office. Most water companies in Australia all cart their water from a contractor before being processed and then bottled, which leaves lots of room for contamination and foreign bodies entering the water. In Tambourine Springs, it's a matter of minutes from when the water is extracted from the spring into a bottle, which is then sealed and stored into a cool, dark environment. The spring water is naturally bacteria-free and passes all quality tests prior to filtration. Despite that, Tambourine Springs water have one of the strictest filtration systems, so there is no room for error when it comes to your drinking water. They do not add any chemicals whatsoever to the drinking water. The only thing the filters are doing is removing sand and sediments that comes naturally with the water. The three-stage system is there to ensure no bacteria have found its way into the water. When you purchase your water from Tambourine Spring Water, you know you will receive the best spring water Southeast Queensland has to offer from a local family on a mission to provide the best service and quality. Water companies are often blamed with a good reason for polluting the environment with plastic bottles. This is not the case with Tambourine Spring Water. Your water is delivered to your door in 50 or 20 liter bottles, and your used bottles are collected, disinfected and refilled again, so zero plastic waste goes into the environment. Me and my family are also using Tambourine Springs water way before they decided to sponsor this podcast. By experience, once you drink real spring water for a while, you cannot drink from the sink anymore or any commercial waters from the supermarket because it smells bad and has bad taste. Ridiculously enough, in Australia you can mix 50% of the water with tap water and label and sell it as spring water. This is not the case with Tambourine Springs water. I personally know the family who owns it, and I have been numerous times in their small factory to see my water being bottled straight from the spring after the filtration process. Majority of my team also purchase their drinking water from Tambourine Springs Water. Find out more at tambourinSprings.com.au or call 0434 952 449 to order your water today. Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the Fight Zone podcast. I'm Seth, and in this episode I talk with Lubomir Guedjev. He is the man who introduced BJJ in Bulgaria and is now working for ADCC as organizer and referee. He is also the man who created curriculums to introduce BJJ into Abu Dhabi public schools and armed forces. He is currently one of the very important people in the BJJ world, being very humble in the same time, and I have the honor to call him not only my great friend but also my first BJJ coach. He is advisor at Global Aerospace Logistics Corporation and BJJ Black Belt. You can follow Lubomir Guedjev at Instagram EL_LUBO_PATRON. The link is in the description. And this was one of the hardest episodes to record since Lubo is living and working in the United Arab Emirates and the social networks are not accessible there. So we had to contact and record this podcast by phone. We are talking about important aspects about creating a syllabus for Jiu-Jitsu, and if you're coaching, I hope you enjoy and learn from this episode as much as I did.
Why do we fight? To protect home and family. To preserve balance and bring harmony. For our kind, the true question is, what is worth fighting for? The Fight Is All podcast.
Okay, we're on. First of all, thank you for jumping on. It was quite a making to make this one.
Yes.
So for people who don't know you, you're my first BJJ teacher, and you have quite an interesting story in the combat sport. So let's start with this one. Tell me your combat sport story, just for people who don't know you, and you're working on very high level in BJJ in Emirates. So yeah, you on.
Okay. Well, first of all, hello to everyone. So my life story goes like this. When I was 20, I arrived in Abu Dhabi in search for a better life, and more opportunities. And accidentally, I started practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the club of one of the royal family's members, who invested heavily in Jiu-Jitsu and created the first ADCC competition, which later became like one of the most respected competitions in this brand. I had the opportunity to be the head judge and the head referee of that tournament for about 7 years, and I had the chance to practice with most of the best names in the industry. Everyone that was coming to Abu Dhabi for the tournament or to visit the Sheikh, we would get to practice with them. So at a very young age, I had access to some of the top names in the world of BJJ and grappling. And then in 2005, I went back to Bulgaria when we met, and I started teaching Jiu-Jitsu and doing some MMA. As you know, we had some fights, we made all competitions, we organized events, and we tried to develop the sport there pretty much. And in 2011, I was invited back in Abu Dhabi to head the Jiu-Jitsu project, which was by that time initiated by Sheikh Mohammed, who is the Prince of Abu Dhabi. He issued a directive that Jiu-Jitsu must be practiced in all government schools and in the armed forces. So they invested heavily, and from the period of 2010 till now, there are around 700 black belts teaching in government organizations, mainly schools and army, but also like football clubs and a couple of other smaller organizations. And I had the honor to be in charge of that project for about 5 years. So I get to hire coaches and work on the training programs and establish curriculums for the schools and different courses for the army and for different government law enforcement agencies. So yeah, that was pretty cool, working with anywhere from 60 to about 400 black belts. And developing things that did not exist in Jiu-Jitsu was a very interesting aspect of that work. And then for the last 3 years, I'm working as a consultant within the armed forces on that program. So I get to manage 60 coaches who train in various locations in the country, and doing pretty much the same thing, working on the training programs, doing tournaments, and trying to improve all aspects of the program. And that's about it.
So that's very interesting, and I'm really proud with what you're achieving, because as my coach and friend and someone who we trained together, and like speaking back in days, he was doing awesome job back home as well.
Yeah.
And calling it one of the best tournament. Actually, ADCC is the Olympics of grappling, so it is the best tournament in the world.
Yes.
In the most respect. Let's talk about, you say you're working about the curriculum of curriculum for BJ. I'm very interested in that, because as you know, I'm working here in Australia for MMF, and I actually just designed curriculum for MMA. And they was actually designed. It was already designed from a French coach, but from my perspective, it was missing a way of a lot of position, because obviously the guy has like a judo background, and it was missing a lot of standard positions, and also some of the most advanced guards that also can be used in MMA. I'm speaking about butterfly and spider guard, which are advanced, but they have very, very important application in MMA, especially if you're dealing with wrestlers, because it's very hard to deal with good wrestler, like I speak MMA wrestler. Using only guards, you need to involve your legs, to remove him. And as you know, like as Bulgarians, we're coming from a country with very strong wrestling, and competing MMA, there we had to deal with that problem. So I think that's very important. So I involved this into some of the high belts. Now the president of our federation here, Richie Krani, he's traveling to Bahrain, where he's going to meet the World Championship is going now in Bahrain, so he's going to meet the representatives of the World Federation, and I'm hoping my version of the curriculum will be respected for them and have application in the world. So can you tell me your work about this curriculum for the schools and how you structure it by levels? I'm very interested by that. I want to hear your perspective of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, we need to start with two very fundamental aspects of creating any curriculum. Number one is the environment in which that curriculum will be applied, and number two are the objectives of the curriculum. We had a very unusual environmental business setting here in the Emirates because we had to deliver jiu-jitsu to people who are not self-motivated. Those were kids in school and soldiers in the forces that did not know anything about jiu-jitsu and therefore had no incentives and interest to train jiu-jitsu. They were pretty much forced to. And then in that aspect, the objectives of our curriculum was to build interest, to create that love for jiu-jitsu, to make it more friendly in the terms that these people are not guys who will spend their personal time to go to a club and experience physical activity that is sometimes very demanding just because they really want to be the best, right? So we had to deliver it within their own setting, which is the schools, within the curriculum of other classes. And our main objective was to introduce jiu-jitsu to that large population and build interest. And out of the people that we introduced jiu-jitsu to, we were expecting obviously 1 to 2% to have that motivation to become athletes and competitors. Obviously, during the years, this percentage grew because there were a lot of efforts put in making different tournaments and giving different type of incentives and rewards so that people find more sense in training. Within the armed forces was pretty much the same, so non-self-motivated people. So that's very important because teaching in an academy gives you the opportunity to push your students to their physical and mental limits because you know they enjoy that. They came in search for that, right? But teaching an organization where people have no choice and have to practice is quite different. You need to please them. You need to make it enjoyable. So these two aspects are very important when you first start thinking about creating a program or curriculum. And then secondly, we need to look at the objectives in terms of technical aspect. What do you want to achieve technically? Do you want to build competitors? Do you want to build people that are overall better in self-defense and physical aspect, improved physical ability? What do you want to create? And again, the academies are different than what we had to experience here. So I would say you need to look at these first two aspects. And then the third aspect that is secondary to these two, I would say that technically the amount of styles and applications of different techniques is so vast in the grappling and the jiu-jitsu world that I wouldn't put any priority over techniques. I mean, different schools have different curriculums and they apply different strategies and tactics, different degrees of technical skill within each belt. So if there was anyone that was proven better, you would see the winners of all tournaments being from that school. But as we know, the winners of the tournaments are from various academies, various different methodological teachings. So it just means that it's the person that develops specific skill and style of game that makes him unique and that gives him the advantage when they compete, right? So in terms of techniques, my approach here to creating the programs was starting from fundamental techniques that help develop the physical abilities and the motor coordination skills that the player must have. So we would start with the fundamentals, and then on top of these fundamentals, once they're good, you would select a style that is applicable for the player. I mean, I've observed a very common mistake when coaches are teaching or instructors are teaching according to what they like to use.
That's very common. That's very common mistake, I would say, coaches, because they're different body types, different mental approach.
Absolutely.
And some people who have a similar mentality, like let's say the coach, they can say that, but there's so many different mental approach. They're just people who just don't like, for example, to push, or just don't like to be on the bottom, don't like to be on the top. So that's also part of the mental mentality of the very person.
Yes, and I would say it's very easy to identify when an instructor is using that method of teaching by listening to the expressions he uses. When they use, I like to do this, very often, the word I implies that this coach plays that style, but that's not necessarily what you're going to like or what your body type is going to fit, right? So I would, whenever I had the chance to be involved in the actual training, and I sometimes did give classes, and I continue to do so, just so I don't lose the ability to do so in the practice, I would always derive from what the player feels like doing. I would observe the player or the student, and I would think first what his body type and what his character would be more capable of learning given the techniques he applies, and I would go from that angle. Skinny body types use more flexible style, and bulky body styles use more dominant top game. So you need to take these things into consideration when creating your curriculum. So the curriculum must be, in a way, general and susceptible to any body type and any character of student, right? We cannot create a curriculum coming from what we think is best to do in a certain position. And in that sense, I had the honor of working with the American guy who created the Armed Forces training program in the U.S., who's a second-degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, but also 22 years combat ranger. And it was real pleasure to work with him, and I learned a few very, very fundamental and important things from him. One of them was that for a person who starts training, he needs to know the basic concept of what guard is, what's the objectives of the guard, obviously sweep or submission. So it doesn't matter which sweep or submission is shown, as long as he knows that the objective of that position is to achieve two other things. And then likewise, when you're in someone's guard, your only objective is to pass. But which technique you would pick for passing?
Absolutely.
For a beginner, it really, really doesn't matter. It just needs to build the strategic knowledge of what the hierarchy of positions in Jiu-Jitsu are. And then on top of that, the players must have the opportunity to pick their own style, pick their own positions. So in a nutshell, every curriculum that we've created, I've always pushed for building a general curriculum that gives the opportunity for any student of any body type, of any personal characteristic, to learn the strategic aspect of Jiu-Jitsu, of grappling, and therefore the positions and the submissions, while giving opportunity for the coach to offer anything additional, all the variances, all the different types of arm bars from the guard. That was always left to the coach to decide, because you cannot generalize. You can't make a one-size-fits-all.
And also doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that because grappling game is evolving every year. So like the way, let's take simple armbar. The way we was doing armbar. Like I'm speaking for myself. Like 10 years ago, I was doing it differently 5 years ago, and now with John Danaher, like I'm doing it like absolutely new way. So grappling is evolving every day, every year. So and as a coach, you have to be up to date, and it's evolving because it's generally new sport. It's very popular sport, and as the attacks evolve and defense evolve. So like now, like they moves that was, let's say, was effective 10 years ago, that you cannot catch no one with that because everyone knows how to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're pretty much forgotten, but it's a very common mistake. So again, my philosophy behind teaching or creating training program of any type would again be build it based on fundamentals, because there's things that you need to know. A lot of newcomers to jiu-jitsu are attracted by these fancy moves, but they lack the basic skills, and that's the platform that you need to build on, right? You need a strong base to be able to build whatever fancy moves you want to build on top of that.
I have a very similar view on any technique or system, because if you don't have the basic fundamental game, any advanced move that you might try, you might attempt, might put you in very bad position, just because you don't know what to do if you get in this position that you don't like. So that's why, like, I'm very much into it, and that's why when I was creating this curriculum, like because the curriculum that was created from this judo guy was created over the top game, but it lacks a lot of position even on top that you do as in MMA. So a curriculum, so starting from yellow to black belt, should cover the understanding of every standard position that you get, which means so top and bottom guard game, top and bottom half guard game, top and bottom like butterfly guard, top and bottom spider guard game. You need to know how to do with this from the bottom. You need to know how to do this from top. If you have some techniques that are more advanced, more fancy, they're alright if you're able to apply them. But you should have like understanding for the whole game. And the same with the clinch, over on the clinch, double under clinch, double overhook clinch. You should have understanding of shooting takedowns, takedowns from the upper body. You should have understanding for every standard position that you get in MMA. You should have like at least to know what to do or how to defend from certain standard position. From there, as a coach, as an athlete, the world is yours to develop, to evolve. Like some people will lean over one game, or some on the other game. That's fine. That's the beauty of the sport. But I absolutely agree with that, and that's the most important thing. It's creating curriculum is supposed to be giving the fundamental game, and let the coaches and athletes to practice wherever they know, because. The truth is, some coaches prefer one game, some coaches prefer another game, but you should have overall understanding. So if you go to do something advanced, let's say black belt level, you don't get caught in something stupid, because let's say you're practicing only leg walks for 10 years, right? What happens if you get in north south in a choke? What happens? Yeah, you're very good when you're getting the legs, but what happens if you get caught? Of course, obviously your leg was going to be your A game, but you should know what to do from there and able to get to your game. That's how you're getting good in everything.
I would say that there are certain principles that needs to be followed. If you remember back in the day, Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt was considered to be one of the toughest people you can spar with. And you knew if you're sparring with a Black Belt, you would get smashed. Why was that? Because the Black Belts of that time used to do wrestling, they used to do boxing, they used to fight bare knuckle fights in MMA against wrestlers and against judo guys. So the techniques they used were fundamentally superior as a style, right?
True.
So when I'm teaching, I'm always trying to come up from that angle. What you're showing to your student at first needs to be fundamentally or principally applicable regardless of the opponent's size, style, or background. It doesn't matter if he's a judo Olympian or wrestler Olympian. An arm bar is an arm bar, and a rear naked choke is a rear naked choke. So following that principle, you're building a foundation where your students are capable of at least defending themselves against opponents that are superior physically, technically, and experience-wise. That, in my opinion, that's a good philosophy. Then once you reach that level when they're capable of applying these fundamental techniques and moves that are principally applicable, they're not applicable if the guy reacts in that way or if the guy does that. No, they're applicable regardless of what your opponent is doing, right? You're fighting for getting that arm and you'll get that arm. Once you achieve that, then it becomes an open platform, dynamic environment. Do your omoplatas, do your kimono game the way you like and use the lapel or not. But if you're only teaching things that are applicable in the modern jiu-jitsu without having that fundamental background of doing techniques that are applicable to anyone, then you're really turning into a crippled sport. You're turning jiu-jitsu into a crippled sport, much like karate is criticized for not having punches in the face, and boxing is no kick and no clinch, you know what I mean? So it becomes a sport, no longer the martial art that it used to be. So I always come out from that angle. I always try to think first. You're teaching someone who's new, are you giving him something that is universally applicable and useful? Or you're giving him some fancy move that is only applicable 5 years from now against an opponent that plays the same style, right? That's my philosophy.
So you mentioned traditional and modern jiu-jitsu, and I saw that soon you're gonna do like a seminar in Bulgaria, and that's the subject of the seminar.
Yes.
About the techniques in traditional and modern jiu-jitsu. Do you want to pull up the veil about it and to tell what you're like what you're preparing for this seminar, and just to talk about this subject a bit, because it's also very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, quite frankly, the last couple of times I visited Bulgaria, I find myself spending less and less time doing something interesting. Most of my friends working during the day. There's not much to do, once you go through the typical things that we miss in Bulgaria, when you go back. And then it was like sort of vacuum where I had no idea what to do with that day. So I decided this time I wanted to gain back some of the contacts I used to have and get in touch with many of the people that I used to know that I haven't been in touch with. So I said, what's better than doing seminars, because I know a lot of people would be interested, and I'm often asked when I go for vacation to teach, but I've always been, a little bit, when I want to rest, right? But lately, I've really focused on developing my gi game, working with 6 or 7 black belts on a daily basis in the base where I work. And I can say that I'm in a shape that I haven't been before in terms of knowledge of jiu-jitsu with gi. So I decided to make that distinction because I'm witnessing on a daily basis the effects of modern jiu-jitsu on coaches that are coming from jiu-jitsu background. So most of our coaches are just jiu-jitsu. They don't have experience in wrestling or MMA. So they're what you call a typical modern black belt jiu-jitsu guys. Very good gi game, a lot of fancy moves, very applicable when tried against someone who plays the same style. But I also do experiments when I would play more like a wrestler or do a more static top position game. And I see a lot of these moves fail, and a lot of the takedowns fail, and there's very weak basis for stand-up game in general among some of these black belts that I'm practicing. So I decided to somewhat formulate a distinction between the two styles, highlighting what is useful and important to know from both styles. I mean, I'm not criticizing one of them. I just think it's important for students, especially a beginner, but not only beginners, but especially beginners, to be very clear about the philosophy behind his motivation to practice, right? So you need to know for yourself, you need to be very honest with yourself. Why are you doing that? Are you doing it because you want to get better just for your self-confidence? Are you doing it because you want to compete in jiu-jitsu? Are you doing it because you want to compete in MMA? Or because you want to beat someone who is bullying you? Right? You need to know what's your main objective, what's your driving force. And once you know that, you need to be familiar with the strengths and the weaknesses of the two different styles, the modern jiu-jitsu and the traditional jiu-jitsu. Obviously, let's say, just an example, if you want to make it in the MMA business and you want to be able to fight, you need to do fundamental jiu-jitsu. You need that old school rear naked choke, guillotine, armbar, top position dominating, and good self-defense guard positions. You need that. So there is no need for you to practice fancy lapel games because you won't use it. There's no lapels in MMA, right? But if you want to develop just as a jiu-jitsu competitor, then you need that because that will give you the upper hand in the current jiu-jitsu environment. You need to have a good lapel, good modern style of jiu-jitsu. And obviously, if you're doing it just for yourself, you want to feel good, you want to sweat, then it doesn't really matter what you do, right? So these are the things that I want to focus during the seminar, just to make it clear what's the difference between guard pass if you're applying it without kimono on the street or on the ring, and what's guard pass in a modern jiu-jitsu, the way you use your body weight, the pressure points, do you grip the pants or you catch the ankle, or you apply different strategy to blocking the hip and the legs. That sort of thing is what I'm really interested in giving to someone based on my observations for the past 2-3 years.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's also very interesting. And I can blindly share my own experience with this one, because when I actually met you and in this I met jiu-jitsu, I was my interest was pretty much in combat sambo at that time, because I was kickboxer who got involved into the combat sambo team. And but I was not a sambo guy. I had a problem with the sambo guys. You know, they was way better grapplers than me, and I was just coming into their world. So I was using jiu-jitsu as my, to take edge over them, because they always was taking me down. So then I say, okay, what I obviously cannot become a better wrestler than them, but what I can do. And then I made it. I say, okay, why don't train with this guy? Because that's actually where I'm finding myself all the time when I grapple with these guys. They just taking me down. And when you start with the grappling world, it's very fascinating, and you become a technique junkie. You want to learn everything. You want to learn that, you want to learn that, then you want that, and then in the more you say, wait a moment, I'm lost. Should I do armbar, should I do father, or should I do takedowns? And then you get lost. And then this time I created my own team and say, okay, how I should teach that. And then we sit. with my teammates, with Yabur and Vadi, you know them very well, and we say, okay, let's find what is working, and just to try to put in a system. And of course, that was like 10 years ago. This system grew a lot, and we like add and remove stuff that all the time. But that helps me to concentrate. Okay, I'm doing this stuff, and I'm not doing this stuff. Okay, so what we want to do? We want to compete in MMA. Okay, occasionally combat sound, but later, MMA become our main objective. So that helped me to remove a lot of stuff that I don't need to learn, and I don't need to teach, and to concentrate on the stuff that works for what I want to achieve. Because the thing is, what happened is, okay, in when we was starting that like 10 years ago, like jiu-jitsu and MMA was kind of connected worlds, like you was competing jiu-jitsu, you're competing, you was jumping in. But meanwhile, the both sport developed in a different way. So now if you want to compete high-level jiu-jitsu, it's very hard to compete in MMA in the same time, because it's a different sport. You have to dedicate a lot of time to develop the skills for it. And the same for the MMA. If you want to compete in MMA, you have like very hard time to compete in high-level jiu-jitsu, because these guys are good. They develop
they're just they became two totally different sports, and that's
what happened. That's what happened, and that's good. That's good, because like this, the sports develop.
It's as close as comparing karate and pro boxing.
Absolutely.
So there is no way to develop both skills equally well on a professional level. You either pick one or the other. But back in the day, it wasn't like that. So the jiu-jitsu guys were adaptable to anything. They would fight with anyone. They would compete in any style. They compete in wrestling. They compete in judo. And they obviously did bare-knuckle fights left and right. So that's where the sport, and I think it all comes from the rules of the federations that govern that sport. The rules is what control the style.
Absolutely,
judo, When they changed one rule from not being able to use the pants, for leg takedowns, or not being able to hold the grip with both hands, and immediately it changes the whole style.
Absolutely, because people are trying to win. They always do. Like people always invent new ways, to play with the rules. Yeah. And if you change the rules, you're changing the whole game.
Yeah. So there is no penalties for pulling guard, and now there is no black belt jiu-jitsu guy that doesn't teach pull guard. If you ask me, that's not something you gotta teach. It's as simple as a front roll. So why would you teach a guard pull? You know what I mean? That's the sort of thing that I'm witnessing on a daily basis. I think there's too much focus on how to make a point or how to avoid giving a point in order to win, but specifically on a jiu-jitsu competitions. And that's what academies, in my opinion, need to consider when they deliver classes. You really want to know your objective. You really want to know your students. Are they pure jiu-jitsu guys? Are they jiu-jitsu fans that want to compete? If yes, then go ahead. Practice modern jiu-jitsu all you like. But if you have even a seed of planting, the idea of planting a seed for MMA or self-defense, you should stay away from that. You need to go back to basics. You need to deliver that fundamental knowledge of the universally applicable techniques before you even open the topic of modern jiu-jitsu, right? That's
absolutely
my statement.
So let me get back to you quickly to the curriculum for the children in the army. So that I think that you say the common between these both groups is like they're not self-motivated, but in the same time it's very different, by my opinion, working with children, and also working with people who are like more professionally oriented in combat in army. Like how you did that? I'm kind of curious how you did that in the curriculum.
Well, like I said, so the two aspects that make some difference are both environmental, the external factors. So in the school, we only teach 40 minutes class. because that's how the school curriculum in general is, right? Every other subject is a 40-minute period class. And out of that 40 minutes, by the time the kids change their kimonos, you're left with 30 minutes at best. So in that aspect in school, there was little less focus on sparring. We would focus on a interactive warm-up where you engage the kids in doing exercises that are more game-like so that you make it interesting for them. And then you teach a technique and you get them to practice that technique for as much as the rest of the period allows you. Whereas in the army, the classes are an hour and a half, so we have enough time to make proper warm-up, different types of warm-up, at least once or twice a week. It's more physically demanding and intense. One time in the week is more stretching, and then the other time is free for the coach to pick whatever he likes. Also, in both, there is a system of approaching for a stripe test and a belt test. They're both based, given the circumstances, that both organizations are a client, private client. We had to give them a specific structure of advancing in belts. Therefore, the coaches are not deciding when the student is ready to get his stripe or belt, but both curriculums are made on achieving a certain amount of classes, 40 to 48 classes. That gives you the precondition to be tested for the stripe. So that's the common in between both curriculums. In terms of techniques, although the curriculums are different and they have changed since I left my previous company, they've changed a lot of techniques in the curriculums. I would say that has not made any bit of difference to the level of competitors and to the level of people that practice, which is why I can comfortably say that which techniques are you teaching doesn't really matter, because the people that are self-motivated would eventually find a way to learn whatever they want to learn. What you need to give is a basic fundamental understanding, and you need to observe a minimum amount of achievement in terms of exercising or doing the techniques. And provided that, like I said, in this environment, there was no external company or organization that can say this guy doesn't deserve that belt, right? So we had to give them the equal opportunity when they achieve the number of classes to achieve their stripes. So I would say with the environment here definitely gave a different platform for developing jiu-jitsu. So not all belts given are necessarily corresponding to the level expected for that belt in the jiu-jitsu world, right, in the rest of the world. But since we have to deliver the training and the people have no choice, you can't really expect them to perform like top athletes, and be a killer purple belts. So, yeah, that makes a big difference. I would say if you were to take some sort of advice from my experience, is that focusing on the techniques doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't. There's certain fundamental principles that you need to follow, you need to deliver. Those are improving motor skills, improving coordination, agility, strength, and flexibility, all the physical aspects. Then is teaching your students the fundamental principles of martial art. That is distance, that is balance, body coordination, opponent's reaction, and then how to defend himself effectively. And from there, you should really then it becomes an open platform. You know.
Awesome. What you so thank you for that, and that all this is becoming an awesome episode. And can you tell what you're working at the moment over as projects? That's something you did, and what you're doing at the moment, like except the things that you mentioned.
Well, I'm almost my whole time is dedicated to my work. I was only recently helping an organization in Dubai to make an MMA event. I did find some fighters, help them with managing the event in preparation, just little technical stuff, but I wouldn't call that like a project because it was for a short period of time. We achieved, the guys made the tournament, and that was it. So I'm not doing anything really outside my work. I'm focusing on the work. I'm focusing on my game. I'm trying to go back to jiu-jitsu game, which I had forgotten, doing more like MMA type of game for the last few years. Mm-hmm. And that's my focus now, and I'm not involved in anything other than that.
How people can get in touch with you? It was a bit hard to make the contact between us, but what's the best way for people to follow you and to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm no longer on Facebook. From the social media platforms, I only use Instagram and LinkedIn. So my profiles are acceptable there. They're open profiles, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, I'll put link in the description. And before we wrap this one up, I'm itching, to ask a question, it comes from experience I had in Albania when I was coaching there a bit, when I was working on a project there. And I guess in Emirates it is a bit similar, but it's also different because of the development of jiu-jitsu there. How the women are doing there? Emirates are famous to being a bit conservative towards women. How the women are doing in jiu-jitsu there?
Well, in that aspect, they're doing great, man. So in 2009, when the project in the school started, for the girls, it was always optional. The boys had to train, and the girls had the option to choose whether they train or not. And just within a few years, we had almost 1,000 competitors out from the girls' school, from the girls' schools. I think provided women, young women and girls in the country with the opportunity to express their opinion, to express their characteristics through sport. So they've made a revolutionary change in that aspect. I mean, there is absolutely no distinction between competitions between boys and girls. They're doing equally well on both. They provide opportunities for both equally. There's a lot of support from the government towards that movement. In many other aspects of life too, they're encouraging women to be proactive and to be engaged in any aspect of life in any industry. But the jiu-jitsu has definitely been one of the best platforms where observable results and measurable results can be observed.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that because that's awesome, and that's also changed how people don't realize, but how the sport is a tool to actually change the world, and
absolutely.
That's absolutely changing a so conservative country into a powerhouse in jiu-jitsu. And that gives the women a way to express themselves. That's absolutely amazing, and that's why I was keeping this kind of for the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question I like to ask, just because the name of the podcast, what is worth fighting for, from your perspective?
I've come to realize that in that industry, in the sports and the martial arts. If one day when you're 70 or 80 years old, you want to look back and be happy with what you've achieved, you need to spread the knowledge you've gained through other people. I've never been so much fan of competition or achieving medals, because only few in every sport, only few are those that remain, that become legends, right, in any sport. If you take the percentage of people that practice and the percentage of people that become legends, that are known worldwide and that will always be referred to, it's insignificant. There are only few lucky to be those, So if you're not one of them, then I say what's worth fighting for is spread the knowledge. Give as much as possible from what you've learned to others, because you don't know who you can inspire. You don't know how much you can change someone's life. Maybe one of those people can become one of those legends, and that will make you, proud. So, yeah, that's it, man. Spread the knowledge.
Well, you're very humble, my brother, and but you have to be honest. You planned the seed of jiu-jitsu back home, and now everyone is training like pretty much because you brought it back home. So you're definitely a legend for the sport back home, and it changed the environment of the combat sport back in Bulgaria. And what you're also doing at the moment is just amazing. And I know people tend to forget, but you're one of the most successful people in the combat sports coming from our country. So I'm really proud to know and to call you my friend. So thank you for that. That was really awesome. It was really amazing episode, and I know we was doing this with a great time difference. So we're trying to catch morning night, because we have 6 hours time difference. They're always hard. So thank you for doing that, and I'll stop recording now. And thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for reaching out and staying in touch. And I would love to do that any other time.
Of course, we have to do this again. That was awesome.
Yeah. Perfect.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Fight Zone podcast. Subscribe in your podcast app to receive the next episode, where I talk with a true BJJ pioneer, the man who introduced BJJ in Laos, my friend and BJJ brown belt Amat Al-Lair. We are also talking about his interesting story about immigrating in his own country, the philosophy of how you need to die many times, and he also shares a great Zen lesson from an old judo master.